If you're around my age, you probably were really into Zoey 101, or at least one of the other Dan Schneider era Nickelodeon shows. And Zoey 101 has always been a fascinating phenomenon to me in particular because it's one of the first big hits of that era for Nick, and you can really tell in a lot of ways that it was really trying to find its footing, no pun intended, in comparison to a more airtight sitcom-style formula like iCarly or Victorious. Zoey 101 was a lot more subtle in its overall presentation, the concept was super simple, a bunch of kids going to a beautiful California boarding school, and a bunch of shenanigans ensue on their campus. There's no laugh track, the jokes are wacky but still feel pretty grounded, and to me it's closer in vibe to something like Degrassi than it is iCarly. A lot of focus is put on the relationships between the characters, dragging out these will they won't they plot lines across multiple seasons and presenting them in the most agonizing, melodramatic teen girl fashion. And girls my age at the time, myself included, completely ate this shit up. But as big as a hit as Zoey 101 was, it was also one of the shows on Nickelodeon that had a pretty fraught and now public production history. Everyone kinda at least has a vague understanding of why this show ended when it did, why there was a revolving door of cast members, and why this is a property that probably should have, stayed in the vault. But that is not what happened, because nostalgia bait is profitable. Many studios, especially Paramount with its endless treasure trove of beloved kids content, are continuing to cash in on the nostalgic reunion trend, parading out old characters to see where they are now in updated real-life scenarios, sometimes for a new series or in some cases a new movie, which is the direction they went with Zoey 102, just released today on Paramount+. In my opinion, Zoey 102 can best be described as a sinister, nostalgic nightmare. It's this lumbering Frankenstein's monster of a thing, trying to harken back to the feelings and vibe of the original show, but is devoid of any charm, not only in the presentation of its subject matter, but also because we all know what happened behind the scenes to get to this place, and none of it is good, and it's impossible to overlook despite how much everyone involved in this wants you to forget about it. And if you're out of the loop, let me briefly catch you up. First of all, not everyone present in the original show is in this movie. And you may think, okay, that's fair, sometimes people are busy and don't want to make time for a project like this, but that's actually not the case. You may remember in the earlier seasons of the show, Zoey had two roommates, Nicole and Dana. And Alexa Nikolas, who played Nicole, has been very outspoken about the fact that her time on set was miserable, in part due to the horrible dynamic facilitated by Dan Schneider and Jamie Lynn Spears, who played Zoey. Alexa has spoken very publicly about how Schneider was allegedly a creep around the younger cast members, how Jamie created this dynamic where the other girls were constantly bullying her, that's why the girl who played Dana allegedly got fired, and overall speaking her truth to a lot of the trauma that she faced during her time on set. She actually just went on the H3 podcast yesterday and she talks about all of this in depth, and I also want to plug her show Eat Predators Daily, where she is using her platform to bring attention to the exploitation of children in the Hollywood industry, so those links will be down in the description below. All of this to say that Alexa's account of things, which has been corroborated by other folks in the industry, including Jeanette McCurdy, who starred in another Dan Schneider production, iCarly, and Jamie Lynn's own sister Brittany, has not painted Jamie in the most favorable light. And on top of that, Jamie has been in the news fairly recently over her rocky relationship with Britney Spears. If you followed the Free Britney movement at all, you will know that Britney has been highly critical of the members of her family, who she says forced her into a conservatorship, and has explicitly stated that Jamie Lynn did not have Britney's best interest at heart during this whole period in time. Jamie has defended herself from these accusations, including claims that she even stole money from Britney, but obviously this is all being hashed out in the courts still, and the general public opinion tends to favor Britney after all she suffered during her time in the conservatorship agreement. But while all of this is going on, Nickelodeon, against all odds, still really wants you to remember how much you loved Zoey 101 back in the day. You might remember they did that whole time capsule bit in 2015 where the actors who played Chase and Michael reprised their roles for a short sketch where they reveal what Zoey said in her DVD canonically 10 years after the original time capsule episode aired. All of that now contrasts the canon of this movie if I'm not mistaken, but needless to say, Nickelodeon had always been eager to cash in on the many unfinished storylines of Zoey 101, regardless of any controversy that Dan Schneider or his productions have received after all of this time. This is evident by the fact that his name literally still appears in the opening credits of the movie, which jump scare, but okay, movie existing in spite of various controversies is not a new concept. The film, in theory, could still be good, but it is not, and we're gonna talk about why. So here is the full plot of Zoey 102, full spoilers ahead if you care. Zoey is a workaholic television producer. Anyway, she works on a reality show that is basically an in-universe version of Love Island. She faces a lot of comedic over-the-top sexism from her boss, who is committed to doing his best Tony Stark impression. This isn't the main conflict of Zoey's story, though. Apparently, she has become awkward and rather self-isolated and hasn't had a legitimate relationship since she broke it off with Chase in Hawaii after the end of the original series. Quinn, who is now a famous inventor, is getting married to Logan, who is now a rich himbo, and she asks Zoey to be the maid of honor at her wedding, but it's the same night as the live finale of the reality show season she's working on, which Zoey sees as an opportunity to prove herself to her boss. To prove that Zoey is completely over Chase, she uses one of the actors who submitted a self-tape to her reality show as a fake Australian surgeon boyfriend to accompany her to the wedding for the weekend. Meanwhile, Chase works as a school teacher and brings along his school teacher girlfriend. All of our main characters are also joined by Michael, who is honestly a joy to watch, his comedic timing is still really good, and Stacy and Mark, who are really annoying. Stacy in particular, especially because she was the most obnoxious character in the original show. Various unimportant hijinks ensue, and one thing remains clear: Zoey and Chase are clearly not over each other. They never got over each other, and that is still the point of the whole adventure that we're on here. Fast forward to the wedding day, and Zoey arrives late because she and Chase got stuck in a self-driving car. Then the ceremony is ruined because Stacy, who is apparently a true crime podcaster now, stops the officiating because she accuses Zoey's fake boyfriend of being the Malibu murderer, which is a case she and Mark have been working on. Oh, also, I forgot to mention this in the script. Her and Mark are married now, and they briefly mention that Quinn and Mark used to date, and then they don't touch on it again. Zoey's fake boyfriend stands up and says that no, he's actually just an actor and this is a whole misunderstanding. On top of that, Zoey is trying to be in the wedding while also trying to feed lines to a contestant during the live finale, and Quinn finds out and becomes pissed. She also gets pissed at Logan because she never actually wanted a big showy wedding, and she gets so frustrated that she calls the whole thing off. Then Zoey decides that in order to save the wedding for some reason, they have to bring the whole party to PCA, which has apparently been closed for years because it was never an accredited school to begin with, and the dean was literally laundering money. Chase also reveals that he and his date broke up like 2 weeks before the wedding, and she agreed to go with him so that he wouldn't be alone. Logan apologizes to Quinn. They basically redo the I love Quinn Penske, I love Logan respit from the original show, and then they get married. Chase and Zoey kiss, and Zoey also learns that the live finale was actually a success, and she gets a corner office promotion. Then we find out that Stacy and Mark were right all along, and that Zoey's fake boyfriend is in fact the Malibu murderer. Okay, so this movie is made for millennials who peaked in high school, because it's about millennials who peaked in high school, and it really has nothing more to offer than that. The whole plot hinges on Chase and Zoey finally getting together, as we thought they actually did at the end of the original series, and everyone else is just there to orbit around that goal. Which is a shame, because yeah, that's what a lot of people loved about Zoey 101. It's essentially the most iconic aspect of the show, the fact that this was essentially the slow burn to end all slow burns, but there was a lot more about it to like. The ensemble was always really strong together, and obviously you can't set the show back at school because they're all 30 now, but I would have liked to see something a little more substantial for all of them to work with. It's also just a bizarre premise. Like, we're told that Zoey is now basically a recluse who doesn't talk to anybody, and yet she's the maid of honor in Quinn's wedding. Chase is the best man, Stacy is in the wedding party, and Michael at first is the officiant. Like, I guess that wouldn't be so hard to believe if it was implied that they all stayed in the same town after they graduated or something, but all of them are seemingly successful and living in totally different parts of the country, and on top of that, Zoey has seemingly isolated herself from all of them anyway. And I guess Zoey's character wasn't super developed in the original story. She was like this bratty protagonist kid, so to give her a more fleshed out character, they make her super awkward and kind of a klutz, and she's super obsessed with her high school boyfriend still. She's just so uncool, and you're not exactly rooting for her, especially when you find out that the Hawaii trip didn't happen because she more or less stood Chase up, and the reason she gives is that she was nervous about it all going wrong. And then the both of them just spent the rest of their lives pining over each other until they were 30 and just happened to be at the wedding of their best friends, who they, I guess, have never been in the same room as up until this point. It's not like I expected top-notch level writing from something like this, but you can tell that at its core, the makers of this movie had nothing to say. There is nothing thematically interesting here. We quite literally just pick back up where we left off. Like, they're going to make Zoey 103 where Chase and Zoey have mysteriously broken up again and need to go on another absurd quest to get back together. It's just the nature of this story, and no one wants to dive into anything beyond that, so it's worth asking why the work even needed to exist. I mean, it's called Zoey 102. The whole thing reads like a film that should have come in a cereal box DVD case. And that's not to discredit the work of some of the actors in here. I think Quinn and Logan have some good characterization, and I would have liked to see more of them, and Erin Sanders is so beautiful, holy shit. Anyway, I also think Michael had a lot of solid comedic moments, and the actor who played Zoey's fake boyfriend was honestly the funniest part of the whole thing. He did a great job, and I wish I was saying that about an actual pre-existing character, and not the only new character who basically exists as a plot device. And I'm sorry, the Mark and Stacy side bits were just so annoying. None of their jokes were funny. They did not need to be in this just because there were other cast members who didn't come back and they needed to make it look like it was a fuller reunion of the original cast. No one was clamoring for a Stacey Dilson resurgence. I'm sorry. I guess my biggest takeaway here is that this was made to appeal to a very specific type of person and probably would have been received a lot better had it been done like 10 to 15 years earlier. It just feels like a product of a bygone era, and I just feel like current audiences demand a lot more from their art. It's not enough to just slap some old characters into a new project. You have to actually give your audience a purpose in wanting to see them again, and in this case, the purpose was that Jamie Lynn wanted a check. It just seems like the ship has sailed. I even remember the time capsule thing was a big meme back in like 2015, but it doesn't seem like this is going to reach anywhere near that level of awareness or conversation, and I don't want to shit on the people who made it, but I do not think it's the kind of thing that can exist on its own, stand on its own 2 feet, and I also feel like no one is going to be able to consume it in good faith, knowing what we know about the troubled production of the source material and how it caused so many problems for so many people. Ultimately, your high school classmate who went into nursing and has a cop boyfriend and loves Morgan Wallen is going to like this, and probably no one else will. But you know, Ellen Pompeo left Grey's Anatomy, so those girls need a win. And if Paramount is doing more of these nostalgia bait projects in the future, I really think they need to find a way to address the Dan Schneider elephant in the room. It's always bothered me that that story has gone so unresolved, and I know it's because nobody has brought any formal criminal or civil charges against him to my knowledge, and he took the big settlement from Nickelodeon and he cashed out and he's probably doing whatever now. But to just pretend it never happened and then continue to dredge up these properties and slap this cheery coat of paint on it as if there wasn't a lot of abuse of minors and child actors under your watch seems really sinister and gross to me. And I was a big fan of Nickelodeon back in the day, and I'm sure a lot of you were too, and it's just kind of gross to think back to that time and realize that there were people not much older than you who were being put in these really uncomfortable and gross situations and basically got no reparations or help. With all that being said, you guys, I hope I saved you some time here and that I quelled enough of your curiosity to the point where you don't feel the need to go check this out, because trust me, you're not missing much. What I will encourage you to do, however, is go check out Alexa Nikolas's page and hear her talk about her stories and her time at Nickelodeon. It's really important that she's getting the truth out there, and it's also just really fascinating. And if you haven't read Jeanette McCurdy's book, I'm Glad My Mom Died, it also dives into this topic as well. I know Hollywood exploitation, especially of minors, is a very charged and divisive topic, and so I like to prioritize the narratives of victims who actually come forward and share their story and were involved and impacted by this situation. I think there's a lot of power in giving truth to those narratives, because there can be a lot of misinformation from whoever has a vested interest in a politically charged topic like this, and what Jeanette and Alexa are doing is so brave, it's so important, and I really encourage you to go check out their work. That's all for me, you guys. Keep an eye out for a new How the Internet Fell Out of Love With episode next week, and I'll see you next time. Also, go follow me on Twitter, thanks!